As we kick things off again, welcome to Unlocking Inclusivity on how this new ERAF program, well, not so new, can transform your business. We're excited to share this valuable information about the Employer Reasonable Accommodation Fund and how it supports inclusivity and accessibility within the workplace. Um, just before we dive in here, just a few quick house rules to ensure that we have a smooth session today. Make sure that you keep your mics muted during the presentation so we can minimize any background noise. And feel free to drop your questions in the chat box at any point. We'll address those here near the end. And this webinar has just been recorded and will be shared with you guys afterwards. We definitely urge you to submit this to your colleagues, anybody within your circle that might find this information quite valuable. So, just to introduce myself really quickly, my name is Ray McCoy. I'm the program coordinator for the Employer Reasonable Accommodation Fund. In short, my role consists of really two main parts, which is, overseeing the operations of the program, as well as the marketing and outreach, connecting with potential employers, current employers, and partnerships here. So that's me in a nutshell. And actually, before I go on, we have the ERAF technician here, Morgan Barrett. So I'm going to invite Morgan to say a few things about what she does.
Hi all, my name is Morgan. I am our account technician for ERAF, and we're very excited to have you guys all here today.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Oh,
All right, try again.
Did anybody hear me? Okay, perfect. Ray, I wonder if maybe it's your sound.
Maybe.
All right, Ray, you want to continue? Thank you so much.
Yep. So you introduced yourself and everything else. All right. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive right in to talk about what the ERAF program is and what have you. So let's start talking about kind of the overall, background of the program, if you will. So what happened was in 2023, we realized that there was a need for that businesses had this desire to, foster inclusivity within their workplaces, primarily small to mid-sized businesses. But the main barrier that a lot of businesses have, been trying to overcome is the financial barrier. As you know, reasonable accommodations, while not, quite a bit, can also be quite cheap, can also be quite expensive depending on what the accommodation is. So as a result, different entities within the state of Minnesota, such as State Services for the Blind, where we're housed, as well as the Minnesota Council on Disability, got together and put together a program with different policies and whatnot as a proposal to the legislature, which was approved. And so, as you can see here, the legislature approved a pilot program that began on July 1st, 2023, and technically goes through June 30th of this year. But being that we have quite a bit of money in excess, we'll be able to still run the program afterwards. And this program is for any sort of businesses that have, needs for reasonable accommodations for employees or applicants with disabilities where we can help offset those costs. All right. So therefore, helping them overcome these either real or perceived financial barriers. This is available for small to mid-sized employers here in Minnesota. I'll get more into, what defines that here in a minute. And we were appropriated each fiscal year. So fiscal year 24, which goes from July 1st of 23 through June 30th of last year. And then, same with this fiscal year, we were given $2 million. Out of that, each year, 400,000 is earmarked for marketing and administrative costs to run the program. So therefore, in total, we have $3.2 million, in which out of that, almost, eight and a half, so $850,000 have thereabout have been utilized to help businesses address their needs for reasonable accommodations. All right, so as I stated, we are housed within state services for the blind, and that's because when the legislature approved this program, they looked around and said, hey, who would like to go ahead and run this program? State services for the blind. It made the most sense for us to do it, so we raised our hands like, we'll go ahead and do that, and that's why it's housed here. And while, in terms of when businesses could purchase, like, can go back to July 1st of 2023, the program officially launched on September 1st of 2023. And so just to give you a little bit more perspective of how this program works, it's designed to support employers in creating inclusive workplaces by removing any sort of financial barriers to accommodations. And therefore, let's say that as an employer, you have an applicant or employee with a disability and you purchase the necessary accommodations. What you could do is apply for reimbursement, because it's a reimbursement program through our website. And each fiscal year, as a small to mid-sized employer, you are eligible to receive up to $30,000 in terms of reimbursements, right? This program not only was created to ensure employees with disabilities have the tools and resources they need to succeed, but also, to help employers, achieve the goal that was, something that was a big need, which is fostering an inclusive, productive, and supportive workplace environment. So thus it's a win-win situation for both, right? So what sets this program apart from many others is the straightforward and accessible criteria. We try to eliminate any sort of hurdles or red tape that come with, most government programs, right? So therefore, we have very simple rules or requirements of what it means to be eligible as a small to mid-sized business. You have to be domiciled in Minnesota. You cannot have any more than 500 employees, and you cannot generate any more than 5 million in gross annual revenue. All right. So simple and straightforward. We support a wide array of reasonable accommodations that align with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So really what it comes down to is, as long as that reasonable accommodation is, aligns under the definition of the ADA, which is, any sort of modification to the application or hiring process, the way the job is done, or the work environment that enables a qualified individual with a disability to perform the essential functions on the job, that's something that could be reimbursed as a workplace reasonable accommodation, except for one exception, which is, when at times an employee may need to have their job revised because of certain, things that they are not able to do. And a lot of times that comes with the change in pay. One thing that we cannot reimburse under this is just the, reimbursement in terms of profit and loss due to job restructuring. But other than that, as long as it falls under that definition of a workplace reasonable accommodation, that's something that we could do. All right, so kind of looking at these examples here, in addition to doing things like installing ramps or other physical modifications, such as, like, altering restrooms or ensuring that elevators are accessible for employees with, wheelchair, like who are in wheelchairs and need to, actually have enough space to get up and down and access other parts of the building. With different advancements in assistive technology, employers can now incorporate AI tools as reasonable accommodations. So, some examples of those might be things like VR training programs, which can create immersive job training environments for employees with physical or learning disabilities, right? AI personal assistants. We all know about things like Chat GPT, might know about Claude or whatnot that can assist in things like drafting emails, reports, or other written material, which can be helpful for, somebody with, like myself who has ADHD, right? And is very useful in terms of doing like writing and organizing there, right? But also adjustable workstations, which are controlled by AI. So, these workstations, unlike, your traditional ergonomic workstations, automatically adjust to meet the employee's needs in terms of enhancing comfort and support. So a lot of great things that are out there here that, you as an employer could take an advantage of depending on, what the nature of the situation is. Right. So as mentioned at the beginning, as an employer, you are eligible to receive up to $30,000 in reimbursements per fiscal year. And this encompasses both one-time and ongoing reasonable accommodations. So looking here, submissions for any sort of one-time reasonable accommodation, an employer must spend at least $250. And that could be um, one like one-time reasonable accommodation or a combination of more, right? So for example, let's say that I buy an ergonomic chair and that's $175. Well, I can't get reimbursed for that, but if I include a desk with that in my application and that goes to 300, then therefore I would be able to get the reimbursement. On the other hand, as you can see here, for each individual one-time reasonable accommodation, it cannot we cannot reimburse more than $15,000. So I'll give you an example of this as well. Let's say that I hire somebody who's in a wheelchair, and as a result, they need to, access the building, and I install two ramps, one in the front and one in the emergency exit. The first ramp is going to cost me $17,000, and let's say the second one costs only 12,000. So this is how the program would work for me. For the first ramp, I would get the full 15,000 with 2,000 left over, capping out of that 15. But for that second ramp, I would get the full reimbursement of 12,000, thus leaving me with 3,000 remaining that I could claim on reimbursement for other reasonable accommodations for either this employee or another employee or applicant with disability between now and June 30th, right? On the other hand, ongoing reasonable accommodations, there are no minimum or maximum spending requirements. So, going back to the examples of things like you could do a chat GPT, which I think the standard or the common subscription for that is $20 a month. So once you pay that $20, then, you apply, we'd be able to reimburse you there and then so on and so forth, as long as you're paying for that particular applicant or employee. So again, putting this back in perspective, once the spending amount hits that 30,000, though, we would not be able to continue reimbursing the employee or the employer until the next fiscal year. So going back to that same example that I presented, let's say that this person also the employee in a wheelchair that I hired also needs sign language interpretation, which is going to run me about $4,500. So I would submit another application to the ERAF program, letting them know, hey, I spent $4,500 on this, but I would only be able to receive 3,000 in reimbursement since that's all I had left over. But come July 1st, I would be eligible for an additional 30,000, as I stated, right, for any other accommodations that might come up, or once this accommodation is continuing being paid for come July, August, so on and so forth, right? So just to give you an idea of how an employee might go or an employer might go from step one to, step four in terms of application preparation, if you would. Let's start with the first step, which is, disclosure and internal processing. So, you know, I know with a lot of organizations, big or small, there's usually a kind of verification process where an employee might have to say, yep, I have to prove that they have a disability or whatnot. I just want to make a note that that's something that ERAF never gets involved in. So, regardless of whatever the internal process is, the employee does not have to disclose, the employer does not have to disclose the proof of their disability as well as the proof of employment, right? Especially since we don't care if that's full-time, part-time, seasonal, or, even a volunteer, right? So just wanted to put that out there here. So after whatever internal processing or disclosure within that's needed, a lot of times, and I know this from personal past experience, when we are finally approved, like, yep, there's acknowledgement we have this disability, what kinds of accommodations do you want? Well, it's not always easy to kind of get. It's like, I don't know what accommodations I want. I know I need something. And that's where step two comes into play, which is the consultation. I'll go way more into detail about that later on in the show. But really what happens here, like like I said, as an employer, if they're uncertain or the employee is uncertain about what kinds of accommodations are needed, whether specific, or whatnot, we have complimentary consultations that are available to employers, and they could do this as many times as they want, right? And sometimes we'll bring in, either different people within the team, Morgan, primarily, or it could be where I tap the shoulder of somebody within the state organization who may specialize in different types of assistive technology. But primarily during this consultation, we discuss potential accommodations that would be effective and appropriate for the applicant or employee. Or this is also a great time if an employer has a specific question about some things that they feel are a good fit for their employee or applicant. It's good to run that by us, because what we don't want obviously is making that purchase and then sending us the application and us having to deny them. We want to make sure that we let them know up front, yes, this is something that could be approved, or unfortunately that's something that would not be eligible under the program, right? So like I said, they could do this as many times as they want, but once they are sure about what kinds of accommodations that they need, they could go ahead and make those purchases. And then that's when they apply, which the application is on our website. So, to give you a clear and engaging explanation on, how this would, process would go, is that, you know, in addition to submitting an application, they would also have to submit their proof of purchase, which usually is a receipt. It could be a paid invoice, something that officially shows is paid, or it could be a check stub. Sometimes if we need to do a little bit more verification, we do. But what happens is that it also has to show four things: the description of the item, the date in which it was purchased, the amount spent, and proof that it's paid. If it meets all four of those touch points, then that's something that would suffice. So, the application is reviewed. Usually I'll review it within 5 business days and follow up if we have any more questions or need any additional stuff. But once it's approved, Morgan will reach out to you and, work with you to complete the substitute W-9 form that to complete, as well as get you registered as a vendor in our state database, which is Swift, to make sure that you're getting your reimbursements quickly and efficiently. And she will walk you through this process as much as she can. Morgan, I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth, but just wanted to give you props that's how you usually do. So wanted
That
to
is
just throw that
correct.
out there. Mhm. All right, cool. So yeah, once all that is done, as an employer, you can expect your reimbursement within 30 days. And that goes back to the fact that we understand that reasonable accommodations can put a strain on somebody's budget. And therefore, we want to make sure that, going back to the mission of overcoming these financial barriers, that money is back in your account. So, very quick turnaround, right? So, moving on here, while we want to provide, critical support to employers in terms of making reasonable accommodations for their employees or applicants with disabilities, unfortunately, there are specific times where we're not able to do that because of whatever certain reasons where we have to deny. So while I won't read all this verbatim, I'll give you some examples of what might count as like under one of these categories. So the first one being like not a qualifying reasonable accommodation expense under the definition of the ADA. So when I started, we actually had an employer who purchased a vehicle for his employee with a disability. I'm like, quite generous, and I understand that you got to, help them get to and from work, right? But unfortunately, commuting in general is something that does not qualify as a workplace reasonable accommodation. As it's a car, they could utilize it for any other personal reasons, and therefore that's why it's not. But what we inform the employer is that, let's say with this company car, this person was in a wheelchair and they needed it to be modified in order for the employee to access the car because they need to run different errands as part of their job, like putting in a lift or putting in hand steering devices. that would be something that we could reimburse them for, right? So we were very clear with them when we sent them the denial letter. But also another one being that, it's not for, the applicant or employee with a disability. So we've actually encountered a few businesses that have made general upgrades to their buildings to meet ADA compliance, but they didn't have a specific request to do that from the applicant or employee with a disability. And while these things are very beneficial, obviously, to attract people, unfortunately, that's not something that we could reimburse because of that, right? And finally, this last one here, missing or insufficient documentation, that's a little bit, you know, on the skewed side. So I'll explain that. Like, let's say that somebody has an application, but you know, they didn't send in their proof of purchase. Well, we're not just going to up and deny you right off the bat. We're going to try to reach out to them, and we usually give them about 90 days to get that stuff into us as needed, because we understand that sometimes, you know, you might not have all the stuff right then and there. While we encourage you to wait until, you know, you have all of the paperwork, like the proof of purchase, pretty much to submit. Sometimes, different circumstances or scenarios don't permit that, right? So, but on the other hand, something like insufficient documentation, if you would. When I first started, again, we actually had a few people who, made purchases prior to July 1st of 2023. And going back to that pilot program, as I was kind of alluding to, without spoiling any for, surprises along the way, is that the business expenditures have to be, post dated July 1st of 2023 up till now. Anything before that, unfortunately, we'd have to deny. But let's say that, as a business, you've been making, payments towards a reasonable accommodation beginning September of 2023. What you can do is that you could still apply for the ERAF program and get retroactively reimbursed, obviously up to $30,000 for the purchases you made, because it falls within that time frame. All right. So that's also a neat thing that this program provides. But regardless of why an employer is denied, they have 30 days from the date they receive their denial letter to appeal. And this process gives, them to present any additional information or clarify any misgiving or misunderstandings that might have influenced our initial decision to deny. So overall, we want to make sure that we're giving everybody the best chance that they can get, because we want to give this money away. We want to make sure that this program is, continues to be a success and continues to touch people, all over the state. Blah blah blah. I could go on and on about that, but we will not. So moving forward here, again, as I stated, this program does not allow a, huge amount of information like other government programs will. So at no point within this does the employer need to submit things such as, proof of employment, or proof of, like, whether employment status of that particular employee or whatnot, because again, as I said, we don't care about that. But also proof of disability, that is, your personal information that's between you and the specific employee or applicant, right? The only thing that we would need after, the application at times would be just, in terms of, proof of revenue, that you meet that 5,000 or 5 million annual, gross revenue requirement, right? So, with that being said, very easy, very accessible, and we want to make sure that we keep it that way so that businesses would, be encouraged to apply for this. But also, we're compatible with other programs that are out there. So, programs such as like the disability waiver program. Let's say that you have an employee who, through the waiver program has a job coach, right? And at the same time, you realize there are other accommodations they need that, this waiver program wouldn't pay for, such as, like, maybe some, like, a planner or something, or an ergonomic desk. Guess what? They could still utilize the ERAF program to get those. Same thing goes with a loan or something. Sometimes we understand that in order for this program to, in order for them to get accommodations that with things like ramps or other types of building improvements that meet ADA compliance, that it might require taking out a loan. Let's say you don't have to wait to pay off that loan either. It could be just one payment and then you can apply, because one, it's already been paid for. And then two, once you receive the reimbursement, technically you can use that to pay off some, if not all of the loan. So very neat in that way too. So, and for those of you guys who don't know, you know, we're the only state in the country that's still doing this. We're starting to gain, attention, majorly from other states. We have actually, just recently won an award for, equal opportunity, and that's really, opened a lot of other people's eyes across the country about how effective this program could be. So yeah, we're definitely getting this out there, but yeah, this is a unique thing that's still, unique to Minnesota. um Going back to this though, one other thing I want to point out: the only time, if ever, within the application process where an employee or employer might be required to return some, if not all, the funds, is if, like, through the audits that we do, right? Because we do have to do audits, every quarter. We find that they did not meet the requirements, but with things on the front end, the way they are in terms of not only, us being able to, having to verify the revenue, but also there's a question within the application that states, like, they certify that they meet those requirements, as I stated here, of a small to mid-sized business. So, you know, it hasn't happened yet. And, we're, like I said, we've been good at, like, really, really sifting, get people through and getting them the accommodation or the reimbursements for the accommodations that are needed. So, um, as I stated earlier, this program is not just about throwing you money and, just saying, hey, go figure it out. That's that. No, we want to help give you guidance as best as we can, because we understand that, when it comes to things like, ADA requirements that could be complex, or when it comes to things like, understanding or realizing, okay, what kinds of reasonable accommodations might be reasonable accommodations, that could be a very, like, complicated process, right? So therefore, that's why we offer these consultations to you. And in addition to doing things such as, you know, talking through what kinds of accommodations might be the best fit, what kinds of accommodations might be, helpful, or, letting you know on the front end if the accommodations would be things that we could reimburse. We do other things such as, talking with them about, what their rights are under the ADA in terms of hiring and retaining individuals with disabilities, as well as what the employees' rights are. But also going back to that, let's say that it's something like an elevator or a ramp or other sort of building modifications. We want to make sure that we are giving you the best tools possible. So, ADA guidelines on how you have to, what things you need to look out for when you're updating your restroom, or when you are, making a door, accessible for employees or applicants with disabilities, making sure you have that information not only from the ADA, but also here within the state of Minnesota, there's the Department of Labor and Industry accessibility guidelines as well, right? But in addition to that, connecting, with different sorts of trainings, whether that be within deed or outside of deed. So one I'm actually going to talk about here in a little bit. But in addition to that, being that we're still a brand new program that's unique not only to Minnesota, but the country, answering any sort of unique questions that come up. And we're always getting new ones here. All right. So moving forward, looking at some of the impact here that ERAF has and some of the success stories, these testimonials highlight how, we have been able to empower Minnesota businesses to create more inclusive and productive workplaces. So, really, employers such as, like, the Aiken County Developmental Achievement Center have been able to improve employee comfort and productivity through specialized accommodations, while, the Lanesboro Chamber of Commerce has been able to benefit from the financial support to meet their employees' needs without any sort of strain, the thing that we talk about. But one of the biggest success stories of all is comes on the next slide here. So let me share this one. This is one that we're probably most proud of. This is Ellie right here, and she's a dedicated employee at the Dunn Brothers Coffee here in Hopkins. And one of of three, franchises that the person who owns them owns. So, thanks to ERAF, the owner was able to, purchase a automatic, espresso machine that made tasks for Ellie, a breeze in terms of making drinks and also keeping her safe, right? From, doing so, which is something that a traditional espresso machine wouldn't be able to do for her. So, she was enthused for Ellie. This job wasn't just about, making coffee, but for her, gaining independence, building confidence, and being a part of a supportive team, which are all things that, ERAF is dedicated to helping employers do, you know. So a really big heartwarming success story. And with the support, we were able to help, this owner expand their hiring practices by, looking at bringing in more employees with disabilities, thus demonstrating, that with the right tools and the mindset, a business can thrive, just by something like this, right? So, quite a bit of great stuff that's happening here. So, to kind of tie this all together, right? What's in it for you? I mean, the obvious, right? We're committed to reimbursing businesses $30,000 in terms of covering any sort of cost for reasonable accommodations, right? But also, we want to make sure that we're creating an accessible and a supportive environment where you as an employer can boost employer retention, morale, and productivity. Because as you're probably aware, employees feel more supported and more likely to stay long term and continue, more effectively when they have the tools for success in place, right? So, also we want to help you in terms of becoming a leader in inclusive employment here in Minnesota. And again, like, not to spoil the surprise, but there's a resource where you can definitely do so. But the biggest thing I want to point out is that doing this gives you an even bigger return on your investment. Studies have shown that people with disabilities usually stay at jobs longer than people without disabilities. And thus, the longer an employee stays, as you know, the bigger the return is on your investment by getting them the right tools, where you're getting this, ultimately at no cost or very little cost to you. You are able to, secure this person and help them grow while you help yourself as a business grow. So a win-win for everybody here. All right. So one of the new things that Deed has rolled out through the vocational rehabilitation services programs this year is the disability inclusive partner training, right? Which helps Minnesota employers create inclusive workplace and foster supportive culture for employees with disabilities. And this training focuses on, diversifying your workforce while unlocking the potential of qualified individuals with disabilities. Because again, we realize that, you know, giving you, funding, that's a big step, but it's also, not the only step we want to do. We want to make sure that we're giving you a suite of different sorts of programs and resources that you as a business can tap into in order to achieve that goal of creating an inclusive environment and helping your business grow overall. So, you'll get this slideshow here once this is done. And, if you want to learn more about this, here's the link right here at the bottom. So with that being said, I'd like to open this up to any questions people have either within the chat or, yeah, you can mute your mics. Let's see what we got let's see what we got going on over here. Don't be shy. There's no right or wrong question. There's no, people, a few more minutes. So we can Okay, check that one. Nothing in Q&A. Hmm. All right. So, is there an amount of time I need to be in business before I can qualify for ERAF? We got that from Jill. No, there's not. As long as you are verified as a registered business from day one, you are able to, you are eligible for this if you fit the requirements. So, no time length at all. Next from Andre, I work in a theater company where we often employ people for the duration of a production, 1 or 2 months, and they may not employ them again. Is that sufficient to consider them for, as an employee for the program? Yes. Remember, we don't care what the employment status is. It could be full-time, part-time, seasonal, temporary, or even a volunteer. All right. Good questions, guys. All right. Can we use these funds to pay for existing disabled employees accommodations? Yes, you may. Yep. If that's something that, they need, you fit the business, absolutely. Stuff here. All right. So with that being said, looks like we're pretty good here with questions for now. If you think of any other questions following this, this is how you can reach out to us here. As you can see within this, with Indeed, we're just a team of three: Morgan, myself, and then our supervisor, Lindsay Hanson, who oversees at a macro level this program as well as other programs within um, D. See that there's actually another question. Is there a minimum number of employees required, to be eligible for it? No. You could be a solopreneur. If you have a disability, that is something that you can, utilize as a means to get yourself reasonable accommodations. Right? But yeah, that's all. And like I said, the application is, here within the link, and you will get a, not only a copy of the slideshow, but the flyer, as well as a copy of this recording here. So, looks like we got a few more questions popping up here. If the business is in Minnesota, does the employee need to reside in Minnesota? So that's actually a very good question, and one that we've actually run into here a couple of times. How it works is, let's say that you have an employee who lives in Wisconsin or Illinois. What they have to do is that they have to be in Minnesota for a week every single quarter. So, like, for example, if a business has meetings where they bring all people together and it's like, something that happens within, like, per that week, that would be something that would make the employee eligible, right? And then here goes another one from Jill. I own two different businesses with employees. Are we able to qualify for accommodations for both businesses? Yes. The $30,000 rule, as long as it is each business is independent of each other, and not, as part of a larger, you know, ownership conglomerate, whatever you want to call it, each business would be eligible for, up to $30,000 per, fiscal year. All right. Great questions here. Keep them coming. All right. So yeah, that's everything I got. Morgan, I don't know, not to put you on the spot again, but I don't know if you had any other, you know, anything else you wanted to add to this or whatnot, maybe something I missed.
No, I don't think so. Ray, you were very thorough, but if yeah, absolutely. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or Ray or our shared ERAF inbox. We are happy to help.
All right. Sounds good. So yeah, thank you everybody for coming out. And that concludes this session here. Please again feel free to share this with your inner circle as well. Let them know that we're here and that we are, I'm happy and eager to assist. All right. Thank you.
Thanks all.